What is going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. We're back to business as usual. Back home finally. Got home in the middle of the night and ready to get after it again, as Sheets would say. But sounds like you had a pretty good night, Sheets. So why don't you talk about that, and then we'll jump into today's slate.
Yeah, I'll share my screen here. So one. So we'll get to the one on the left in a second. So this one over here was this was the 250. I came in 12th in the 250. Basically, I thought when we talked about this, I thought I was a little chalky with these KC guys, but nobody played them after all that. And so that was pretty good. I got a one-off out of Dion, who was hitting 6th at 2,800. That hung on for 12. Actually, just got there for like 12th place, which was good. But the fun sweat all night was this thing. So this was a satellite into the $3,500 mega thing. So it was a winner take all against 20 people for like $175 buy-in or something like that. And I basically went wire to wire, but was holding off like people kind of near the end. I had the Washingtons who did nicely. I had the KCs also, and Peralta looked a little sketchy the first couple innings that he got there. And I'll tell you, man, about Bauer. I think the answer, by the way, to my hypothetical question is that I think we're both right. Is that he was definitely struggling, and yet he's just got so much freaking competitiveness in him. You know what I mean? That I think he just kind of willed his way through that start. If you want to know the truth. Yep. And he did well enough. And I held off like the whole country. I had BK Ryder had Brantley up with the bases loaded in the last at bat in the 9th against like the worst bullpen in history, and he couldn't connect. So I was able to kind of hang on, which was fun. Now I got to find out what this is. There's like no lobby with this thing on. I tried to search for it; it doesn't exist yet. So I emailed DraftKings to find out when they're holding this thing. I want to make sure that I don't miss it.
Yeah, no, I know it's a little weird with some of the satellite ones. I've run into that.
So a $3,500 satellite? What do they pay? Like one every 4 seats or something, like every 4 spots, I guess. Something I think
the package isn't it like close to $30K. I think.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
I think it is, but it's still. I mean, a cash game lineup with a little bit of a change here and there. So
we're going to definitely talk about that when that comes. That's
absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And speaking of that, I want to shout out. I promised Jason Aspen from the Discord that we do an extra good slate preview and and do a good live thing tonight because he won he doesn't play that big and he won a seat into the 111 tonight. Which for him is a pretty big buy-in. So I told him that we make sure that we can't tell him who to play necessarily. But we will definitely do an extra good job in conveying our thoughts and stuff because I want to get these are the kind of things I like. And we'll talk about this, Jason. We'll talk about this more in the live stream. But what you have to, and we talk about this, Bobby and I talk about this a lot, is you have to avoid the temptation to play conservatively, even though you're in something that's like kind of outside your normal buy-in. That's usually the dead money or people that are playing higher than they should and they just play cashy lineups just to try to min cash or whatever it is. So make sure that you still do the right things and play good high upside lineups because it is still a tournament with 1 billion people in it. So we'll get to that a little later, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, well let's just jump into today's. Nice job. I mean that sounds like a pretty good night. I would like to say the same myself. I actually broke even. I played 2 lineups or 4 lineups.
Dude, how much better can you bet? You had Kansas City and Boston, and they both did really well. I'll tell you who was like really gutsy, was like really annoyed, was freaking Garrett Richards.
Yeah. Yeah, he that was I didn't expect. I mean, after the first inning, it looked like that game. I literally was getting on the plane after the first inning, I believe, and we were held on the runway for a while. But I thought that it was going to be all right. Let's off to the races, but it didn't. Didn't quite go as well as it hoped. But it still obviously worked out for you, which is great.
And meanwhile, we talked about this too. How freaking hot is Kyle Schwarber?
Oh, it's ridiculous, man. It's probably as good of a streak as power stretch as anybody's been on all year long.
Oh.
All right, well, let's jump into it. We'll go game by game, and I'm pulling up my sheet right here and who I like. So let's talk about Miami and Philadelphia. What are your thoughts on this one? Are you interested in either of the pitchers?
Yeah. So again, I don't like to do this too often. Well, we'll get to FanDuel in a second, but I do like Vince Velasquez as an SP2. I have kind of a standout as my first pitcher, and then this slate is freaking a zoo as far as my sheets go. I mean, like I got like a wall of pitchers like that I could play as my second pitcher, and Vince Velasquez just happens to be one of them. With playing Miami, he does still have some strikeout upside. I'm not going to make him a huge priority, but if his ownership's going to be really, really low, he's certainly going to be part of my SP2 pool, that's for sure. So I didn't get to Trevor Rogers really, even as a secondary one. I guess he just didn't project quite well enough for me. I got to look at it again. I mean, because he's obviously not bad. But I guess 9,700 is just a little bit overpriced. So I like Velasquez a little bit, and I didn't get to any of the hitting.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you a little bit. Again, if I play a bunch of lineups tonight, I actually think I would consider taking a couple shots on Rogers, but it's not my favorite spot. It's just because he's going to be really low owned. He's talented, and that's really basically it. I don't think that the top price other than Woodruff or like automatics, Woodruff and Bueller. So I do think that Rogers could outscore those guys. So I don't think he's a bad play. I just am not getting there myself. I like Velasquez a little bit. It doesn't feel great. It is Miami. That's what the excuse is. He hasn't been good, but it's a Miami team, and at 7,200 as an SP2, I certainly think that he's viable. So I have no problem with it, and I'm not getting to any of the hitting as well. Just nothing that I really feel like I want to go after here. Wouldn't mind if anybody does, but it's just not what I'm doing with my builds.
Okay.
Tampa, Washington. I guess I can start this one off real quick. Sort of in the same. So if you're gonna consider Trevor Rogers, you probably should consider Rich Hill. I don't think I'm going to end up using any Rich Hill, but I would just say like the guy still has good stuff. He's sort of a streaky pitcher, but in general is always always has upside, and it's gets the upgrade by pitching in the National League Park. Look, it's obviously not a great it's a medium hitters park, but you're facing a Washington team that had their best hitters are lefties outside of it's really just Turner that you were crazy about on the righty side of it. Again, it's just a mass. If I was mass entering, I would consider him, but that's about it. And I have no interest in Joe Ross. Do you have any interest in either pitcher?
No. I did have. Did I have any inch? Why do I not have interest in the hitting? I don't though, for some reason. I thought I was gonna like a little bit of the hitting here. I guess it's just middling. You know what I mean? I do like on FanDuel. I like Tampa actually quite a bit. I got Tampa as like a top 3 stack over on FanDuel, but I don't really get to them on DraftKings, and pitching. I didn't get to either of these guys.
Yeah, the only thing I would caution people about Tampa, like we worry about them with pinch hitters in general, and now you get them in a National League Park. Okay. So you have like 4 guys who might not be around later, but the main guys should be there. I'm not getting to much of it personally. I understand it on FanDuel where they're cheaper. At these prices on DK, it's a little bit harder to get to. And I think we should just acknowledge, though, just in general, Wander should be looked at as one of the better hitters in baseball, as I keep pointing out. Like, when a top prospect comes up these days, you sort of want to latch onto them because these guys have they basically all pan out, almost all of them anyway, all the very top ones. Look at all the top prospects from a few years ago are all the best players in baseball right now. So
right.
Anytime you want to one-off him, you could argue that 4,700 may end up being too cheap for him at some point. So at some point very soon. So but again, not much interested for me in that game either. And taking us over to the Angels and Yankees here, it's if this was a bigger slate type of situation for me, and then I'm wondering if I maybe I should consider a low-owned Heaney. I always have some interest in, but I just don't think I want to do it against this lineup again. Good hitting weather in New York. Tyon, I think you could put in a similar category if you want to Velasquez. Actually, looked good last time out. The Angels lineup is not quite. I mean, it's Yankee Stadium. You're going to see a pretty high run total, but Tyon is 7,400 with a 6.5K prop. I'm sorry, with the 5.5K prop. Just mildly interesting here, but not probably more interested in the bats. Although I don't think that they're going to be either of my favorites on this slate, to be honest. How about you?
So it was interesting is that Ohtani hit a home run in his first at bat at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
I was actually shocked. This is his first time at Yankee Stadium. Is this like his first season? I mean, like,
well, he was hurt a lot. He was hurt a lot last year, and it was 60 games, and
right.
They weren't playing him, they were hitting him when he was pitching as often. So, all those things sort of combined for it. But I mean, Ohtani is going to stand out as being. I think he's going to be one of the more popular plays in the slate. I actually think the Angels are going to get some ownership. You have the cheap Fletcher leading off. You've got Ohtani, who's probably way underpriced, especially considering Yankee Stadium with a short porch and all that. You could mix it in with some Jared Walsh, and who's going to be the lower owned part of it. And then in Rendon at 4.2. I know it's not been his year, but I still am always I'm still a fan of him in general. I still think he's a really good real life hitter, and I wouldn't mind that. But I just don't think that I'm prioritizing, because both these pitchers can be solid enough. I think if I had the most interest I would have would probably try and stack the Yankees, because I don't think that people are going to play them on DraftKings. And we know Heaney can absolutely explode at times and just get crushed. But I just think there's better spots that I want to attack on this slate.
I have the Yankees as tied with Tampa as the second best on FanDuel, but nothing on DraftKings really for them. And I do have the Angels as a top 5 or so stack. I would add in again at Renigfo at minimum cost, just to if you wanted to play 5-man. Which, by the way, I don't know if you saw my tweet or whatever, or my Discord thing. So yesterday in the bat flip, you had one player from 8 different teams in the winning line.
Yeah, and by the way, even in the big buy-ins, whenever it's not Coach or Osimo winning it, which is a lot, and most nights these guys keep coming second, thirds, all the way down. But the guys who keep winning these things are playing like 2-2, 1-1, 1-1. I'm just proving more and more that point. When you're playing in a league that's all about strikeouts and home runs, that full stacking without really a team that you can really expose with a bad starter and a bad bullpen. I mean, on big slates, I still think you want to lean that direction, but I don't think that's the only path to victory. And I think that if you're only playing one lineup and other people are playing 35, getting a little different and playing your favorite bats, I don't think you should play 8 from different teams in general. But I do think that, it's more viable now than it ever has been because of the nature of how baseball is played.
If all these guys would be solo home run, I mean, you got Renfroe with double home runs. You had Schwarber. I think Schwarber must have had 9 home runs yesterday. I don't know what he had. But what's weird, man? Everybody hit a home run except Salvador Perez. It's like absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
he didn't hit a home run for some reason. Okay, so I think we both kind of agree. The Yankees are kind of an okay option. The Angels are kind of an okay option, but neither of them are just like the thing you're gonna trample over people to play.
Yeah, agreed. And I do think it's the one-offs I'm looking at, though. I mean, Ohtani's going to be popular, so as a one-off, I don't know how much I love it, but I do think he's too cheap and he's an excellent play. I think he's like a cash game guy you should be using today. But I think Jared Walsh is the guy who will be low owned in the stack, and I'm sorry, not in the stack, low owned in general because of just the first base eligibility. And I do like this price for Jared Walsh. I'm always interested in these power lefties when they go to Yankee Stadium and can hit a fly ball that turns into a home run, especially with the way the weather is out there right now. And on the Yankee side of it, they're just so expensive. But I mean, Aaron Judge and Stanton against any lefty is pretty much, usually money in the bank. So I don't mind playing either of those guys as well. I just don't think it's my priority. I think there's better stacks coming up, and you'll be getting to one of them in the next game.
So Toronto, it's interesting because it's like at Coors North, right?
Yep.
And yet you have one of the more popular pitchers on the slate. I don't know if he's popular, but he's certainly going to project to be one of the top scorers. And that'd be Robbie Ray against Seattle. So just where I am right now is I do like Toronto. If I can afford, I probably can afford them on FanDuel. I do like the Toronto bats at home over there. DraftKings, I just don't think I can get to them. And as far as pitching goes, yeah, I do have Ray ranked. Certainly not my top pitcher, but again, among a laundry list of pitchers I can use my second one, depending on how much I want to spend on hitting. He could you want a ridiculous prop bet? I mean, he could strike out 20 in this game. You know what I mean? Like, he certainly can. He's got exactly the matchup you want. If it's not against Seattle, then it would be against Detroit with their left. You know what I mean? So he could certainly have an incredible game and just really put a number up that everybody's going to have to try to chase, which is could happen. Yet on the other hand, you know, he's the type of guy that we typically don't like to play when he's too chalky. But I have to tell you, Bobby, I'm looking through at least my initial ownership projections. Some of these pitchers are priced kind of low, and they're going to take some ownership away. And Robbie Ray, like if you like him, I wouldn't worry about him being too chalky. He might end up only being 10, 15%. You know?
I agree 100% with all of that. I don't think he's the natural guy people are necessarily going to jump on. And I think that is a spot where his ceiling is enormous. I mean, you said the 20 thing, and I know it's sort of in jest, but like there is some truth to that. I also think that there are bats on the Seattle side that I would be completely happy to take shots on. So I think Mitch Haniger is a priority play. There's a perfect same price type pivot off of Ohtani in a great hitter's park against a lefty that while he can strike you out, gives up a ton of power still. Even as he's pitched well this year, it gives up a ton of power.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can run on him as well. So you get the power speed upside combination. I like that. Ty France, Dylan Moore, cheap. Dylan Moore probably batting too far down in the order for me to really play him as a one-off. And then Torrens is a catcher at 2.4. This is actually an interesting, like, contrarian stack, maybe for a smaller slate, but I think that all these guys are viable as one-offs. Tom Murphy also as the other catcher at 3,400, assuming the lineup shakes out the way that it looks like it will. I certainly don't mind these Seattle bats, especially Haniger. And then I'll be all over as always. I'm just going to overload Toronto every time that they're playing against a pitcher, especially I know Flexen's been much better. This Toronto team is no joke, especially at home, and they don't strike out much. There's too much power in this lineup. I'm just going to treat this game like Coors, and they end up lower owned because their prices. But you know, it's the normal it's the usual suspects, as we always say. Like, I mean, it's Vlad, Bichette, Semien, Teoscar, Biggio. They no longer have the free Reese McGuire at catcher, but George Springer.
What about Springer?
Springer has to. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. George Springer would be the best of all of them, just because, again, another guy who's underpriced here. So I actually think that, you know, just looking at your outfield spots, which are really valuable today, starting off with Springer and Haniger. You know, maybe, you know, obviously Ohtani we already mentioned as well, but those guys all stand out to me as being awesome plays. Springer is just at 4,200. I mean, in this park is just kind of a joke, and I don't think the ownership is good. He'll be owned, but it won't be like out of control on this slate. So
I don't think so.
Love Toronto. And I don't mind just you know, I'm interested to see what we get for an umpire before I decide what I want to do with Ray. If it's anything neutral, even, I'm fine with it. If it's extreme hitters umpire, for somebody who's not going to give you the corners and the low strikes, he really, really can get in trouble just with, you know, with the walks and all that. And when he struggles like that, you can get him. So I like both sides of this game hitting wise. And it's the first game we've touched on that I really think I might target from a hitting perspective. But I also do like Ray, especially if we get an extreme pitchers umpire. I mean, Robbie Ray could, yeah, he's an 8.5 K prop on this slate. You know, he's 10.5. 8.5 is really high for a K prop. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see double digits on his strikeouts, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he gives up a couple home runs. So yeah, this is definitely an interesting game that I'll be paying a lot of attention to.
So one of the aforementioned kind of cheap pitchers.
Yep.
I mean, we kind of laughed about, not laughed, we kind of like said, okay, how can you play Blake Snell at 11K? You know, whatever. Dude, he's 7,600. And, you know, he's obviously underpriced, 7,600. I don't care where he's pitching, you know, and I don't care what his struggles may or may not have been. I mean, I think this is just a hiccup. The ownership I have for him is incredibly too low. People have to play him, don't they?
Yeah, he'll be 25% plus. Yeah. I don't know exactly what he ends up at, but my guess is he would be. The thing, I mean, Cincinnati at home in general does scare people, and they've got some guys you want to get play against lefties in general. But Blake Snell at 7,600, like you said, sometimes you can just write off everything. And the truth is, I mean, 2 out of his last 4 games, he's been actually awesome, and he pitched well against the Dodgers the other night. He's going to put up ceiling games. He has this, 30 plus upside, and at 7,600, he's got to be the guy who, to me, I would have him ahead of Velasquez for upside. Only has a 5.5 K prop. I'm sorry, 6. Oh, actually, it's 6.5 K prop. That's pretty good for 7,600. Another one that I'd be interested to see how the how the umpire shakes out, because we know Snell can get himself into trouble sometimes and just work deep. Not just the walks, he does walk a lot of guys, but it's the getting deep in counts that he frustrates you, and he doesn't. That's why he doesn't pitch deeper into games. And I'm not going to do this, but on a small slate, I would absolutely be taking shots on Santillan, assuming that you had a good pitcher's umpire, or at least not a hitter's umpire. I don't like taking pictures. I actually like the San Diego hitting side of this. I don't think I'll be alone in that. I mean, what a massive park upgrade it is for them playing in Cincy, but I don't think this guy is bad. Like, I think their bullpen isn't very good. I actually think he's got good stuff. I think that this is not maybe the right matchup, but there are going to be plenty of times where I mention this guy's name later in the year. And no one's going to go there today. I'm not probably either, but he does have a 5.5K prop, and to get that against the Padres and when they're supposed to score 5.5 runs is pretty, it's a little high. I would have guessed it was 4.5 or even 3.5 in this one. And maybe Vegas actually does realize that this guy's actually got some decent stuff. So you're going to get a pretty chalky San Diego lineup, especially Tatis. I mean, and what can you say? Can you ever say that it's wrong to play this guy? Like, he's the kind of guy who I would say you need to have him to win sometimes. You don't usually have that with hitters, but he the other night, even when he hit the 3 home runs, I mentioned that the guys who won the big tournaments for the most part didn't have him in all the big buy-ins. So I have no problem if you want to play San Diego. I don't think that's what I'm prioritizing today. I think they're going to have some ownership. I think I'd rather spend a little bit elsewhere. They're expensive. My most owned player in this game will be probably Snell. And then you get into the, if you're going to play the bats from San Diego, other than Tatis, who you're looking at, Machado, Pham would probably be the most natural ones that people will look to. But if people don't want to play Trent Grisham as he struggled, he's further down in the order, I would be happy to go ahead and do so at 4.1. I believe in this guy's talent. I don't know if it's just my eyes, but every time I go to a Dodger game that he plays in, I swear the guy hits the ball harder than anybody I've ever seen. So I just think Grisham is another one of those outfielders that's a little too cheap for what they are. So Grisham is actually probably my favorite play. And also, I don't think he's going to have massive ownership batting further down in the order today. And I'm not getting to anybody on Cincinnati. If you wanted to play Castellanos at 4K, which is a joke of a price, I just want to say that, like, Snell is still a really good pitcher, but 4K for, a guy who's been one of the best 5 hitters in baseball, maybe the 5th or 6th best hitter in baseball this season, at 4K, what are we doing? Why? I don't know why he's priced down there. He's also coming off a game with 36 fantasy points. So I definitely have interest in Castellanos if it was like anybody else. I don't know. I'm not getting to it, but there are some guys who are lefty crushers here. So if you wanted to get contrarian and stack Cincinnati, I think you can do it at really low ownership, and they are really cheap for what they are, with Suarez, Castellanos, Aquino, with some monster upside. So it's just, I don't particularly want to go out of my way to pick on Snell. So I'm not doing it. This is a game I think you're going to see some ownership on, especially on the San Diego side, but I'm probably going to be below the field on everyone except for a guy like Grisham, who is the one low-owned guy in this game that I like.
I have San Diego rated as my top stack, but not by a lot. And their ownership I do have is really, really, really heavy. So when it comes down to it, if these numbers kind of stand, I will end up fading them in my main buy-ins, and I'm pretty sure my MME stuff will end up fading them too. FanDuel likewise. I do have FanDuel as because it's FanDuel, more accessible, and as a result, they have them rated much, pretty high there too, and yet still ownership there is going to be pretty healthy also. So I do like San Diego. Put a gun to my head, who's going to score the most? I say San Diego, but I think their ownership is going to be a little bit too high to make them my top priority. And I agree, no Cincinnati. And I will also say that I don't have to play Blake Snell. If it turns out that he's too popular or whatever it is, and Velasquez ends up being the 5% owned guy, right? I'd try it. I mean, I would, because I have seen Snell struggle at times. The other thing is that I might end up paying up for pitchers or doing something different. So I'm not saying that I'm locking in Blake Snell or anything like that. Right now, I just only have him as one of a zillion guys. So we'll see what happens.
Yep. All right, let's jump on to the next one. And why don't you want to talk a little bit about, because I think we're going to have different takes on this one a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. Neither of these pitchers are for me. And I actually like Kansas City quite a bit I have them now as my second, tied maybe for second as my favorite stack as far as value goes. So what I would do is I would use the value guys like Rivera, O'Hearn, Taylor, those guys, and then even Soler, and then I would filter in guys like, overpriced guys like Merrifield, Perez, or whatever it is. I really do like them a lot. And I myself did not get to Boston. I don't know if that's where we're going to be different, but that's where I'm at. I'm not at either of these pitchers really, and I'm just kind of on KC.
Yeah, so I mean, Pivetta is pretty good against righties, and KC doesn't strike out a ton. I don't mind the KC angle. I'm not getting to it myself, but I do like. I mean, the guys are a little too cheap. So like O'Hearn, maybe more as one-offs. Even Soler in the righty matchup would be my favorite plays. But this KC lineup is they're pesky. They're tough to. They just don't strike out. They have guys who strike out, but as a team, they just don't strike out quite enough. I do have interest in Boston. I think it's a weird spot where you have a team with a giant run total that I don't think is going to have crazy ownership. You have a low strikeout pitcher in Keller, and basically just like, again, we have this a lot of places, but we have tremendous hitting weather, wind blowing out, 91 degrees in Boston. We talk about how Toronto's, cooler's north, which it is. But Boston is obviously, basically the next best hitter's park once you get past those two.
Yep.
When the weather's like this, especially. So I'm high on Boston against Keller. And Keller's another guy who I tend to defend a lot and not as bad of a pitcher as people think. This is not a good matchup for him. Verdugo is way too cheap.
Yep.
Kiki Hernandez, even Renfroe down there, and then you mix in JD, Devers, and Bogarts in some order of that. I think I always side with JD because he's just a better hitter than the other guys are. But I do like that. I do like the prices on Verdugo, Kike, and Renfroe. So Boston I have ahead of the other stacks that we've talked about, except for Toronto. I think Toronto is my favorite as of the one for the ones we talked about. But I like the whole Boston side of it tonight. And I think
Verdugo is really cheap at 4,100.
Yeah.
And you're right, Kiki also.
Yeah, Kiki and Verdugo, people might think I'm just biased because I'm a Dodger fan, so I'm glad you said it too.
Yeah, but everybody played for their Dodgers.
That's what happens. Dodgers turn all these guys into great hitters, and these guys are, Kike, they turned into a great hitter. Verdugo is always going to be a great hitter. But this is it's a really good spot to target Boston, in my opinion, and I think that the Royals bullpen is nothing I'm afraid of. So Keller, I think, doesn't make it through 5, and I think that Boston gets all over him. I really like Boston. So Boston and Toronto are my two favorites so far that we've talked about.
Is there weather issues in Detroit, Cleveland? I know there is in I think Chicago, right? I forget where the weather is today.
There's little bits of potential weather, but nothing that was alarmistic enough to where I think we can't address it later. And it's still too early in the day for me to know. Nothing that I have. Put it this way, shout out to Roth. Nothing that Roth has as orange or worse yet. But there is some potential weather issues here. But there's also, again, excellent hitting conditions all over the place in baseball tonight. And this is another one of those spots in this Detroit-Cleveland game.
Yeah, Cleveland beat the beans out of them yesterday.
That's the thing, and Jose Ramirez was the funniest part, though. You look back at the lineup and all you really needed, if you really wanted to play, you could have won with any other stack and Jose Ramirez. He just went off yesterday. But yeah, they went nuts. And that's what happens against this Detroit team, because they're, like I always mention about them, it's not just that the starters aren't good. Their bullpen is awful. It is awful. So, to be honest, this should be like, assuming this game plays clean, this is a spot where you want both stacks, in my opinion. You have a medium hitters umpire in Laz Diaz, which as the current projected umpire, there's been a lot of umpire switches later in the day this year. So I'm getting a little bit more hesitant to say, hey, this is the umpire who's going to be there. I don't have any interest in either pitcher, obviously. And I think that both of these teams as stacks or mini stacks are really interesting. And you've got the cheap Detroit guys we always talk about, whether it be Baду, who is definitely one of the value plays I would look at today, Robbie Grossman. We have Daz Cameron probably in there. I don't know where he's going to be hitting in the lineup, but I've got him projected around 6th. These guys are all like really, really cheap. And I think Mejia can absolutely get got. And again, this is great hitting conditions. And then you can mix in a scope if you want to. I just don't think I'd want to pay 5.2 for him. I know Mejia was good his last time out against Minnesota. It's really the only time he's been very good all season. The only thing I'd say about him is that he just hasn't given up a ton of home runs. He hasn't pitched a ton of innings either, but he's only given up 2 home runs this year. I still think I like the Detroit bats here. And Urena is interesting because we all want to pick on Urena, and for good reason, you know what I mean? Like, especially with the Detroit lineup, the pitching behind him. But the only thing I'd say in Urena's defense is that, you know, he gives up a lot of hits. He gives a lot of hard contact. Hasn't given up as many home runs as maybe people think. I think I've heard other people talk about him as if he's like a guy who goes out there and gives up 2 every game. And Robbie Ray is actually a more consistent guy to bet at giving up a couple home runs on than Urena is. But when you factor it in with the bullpen, and I mean, Rosario's reasonable priced. Jose Ramirez, as always, one of the best plays on the slate. I'm completely in on the Cleveland stack. I would rake. I always side a little bit more with the American League teams anyway, and I understand the San Diego thing. But if I was going to play a more chalky situation, I think I would prefer Cleveland over San Diego. So I guess I would have them ranked just behind Toronto and Boston. And I know you're thinking of, hey, we don't want to play the teams that just scored a bunch of runs. So I'm sure that you're not as interested in it as I am. But I do like them, and I think it's Ramirez, Rosario, Hernandez, other Rosario would be my favorite plays from there. And if you want to mix in one of the cheapos at the bottom, whether it be Zimmer or Clement, I don't mind that if you're going to do a 5-man. And I like this. I like this whole game environment. So that's what I'm doing. This is the other game that I'm targeting along with that Toronto Seattle situation.
I have Cleveland as kind of a secondary stack sort of on FanDuel, and didn't quite get them on DraftKings. I actually do have Mejia as a viable SP2. Again, just as like just one of like a bunch of guys, you know, if you don't want to play Velasquez, which by the way, as I was looking through my stuff, I neglected to mention, we'll go over this later, that I actually do like, you know, if Velasquez turns out to be the more popular of the guys, I do like Miami a little bit against him, but I'm just kind of staring at this. I do like Mejia just a little bit at 6,100 against Detroit. I didn't quite get to the Detroit, you know, leverage. Now I say leverage stack because nobody's going to play Mejia. But I do like Baddoo quite a bit, as you kind of pointed out, as a good one-off over there. I don't know if you saw, but I think Cabrera hit a home run yesterday. Freaking crushed it, like to the opposite field actually.
Yeah.
But I have a little interest in Mejia as kind of a spread second pitcher over there, and I have no problem playing Cleveland again in this spot. But I'm just not getting them quite yet. But I'll look at it later.
Yeah, it's one of and the thing is, they're going to be fairly popular in the spots that I mentioned. The guys who I like, the people are going to like. But again, we're not as worried about ownership in general on this slate, so you'd have to really love them though, because there are other good stacks. I have them behind Toronto and Boston, but a little bit ahead of San Diego, and I think Detroit, not necessarily as a stack, but getting these cheapos in definitely makes some sense. The only issue I have with Cabrera, who by the way, I mean, just even in even when he's struggled and hasn't had as many home runs, he's just not as powerful as he used to be. Can't really run anymore. But he's still a good real life hitter. I just don't like using the first base spot on Cabrera at 2.8 with the lack of power that he has. I mean, he still has enough to obviously hit a home run here and there, but I just don't. I'd rather look elsewhere. I want to usually spend. I want a first baseman that's going to give me some production, and he's not. That's the only reason I don't go to him very often. I want some massive upside with my first baseman. We have the Mets in Atlanta. Do you have any? What are we doing with the pitching here? Because I think that this is a spot where you should absolutely not be shocked by have any sticker shock with Charlie Morton. I understand that it was just against this team, and maybe it's not good because it's back-to-back games against this team because he missed his he pinch hit in that game against Cincinnati, but he's on his regular rotation. He's put up 32 and 38 in his last 2 games, including 38 against this Mets team, actually 38.75, struck out 11 guys in 7 innings. He's looked awesome. And Morton, as I always say, he's better than everyone else always thinks. This game, he gets a lineup that I don't mind attacking. We don't have any umpire data yet. I'm curious about that, but I think you're going to get no ownership on Morton. And I think there is just as good of a case for him to be the top scoring pitcher on the slate as there is the other guys. A 6.5K prop is not going to jump out at anybody, but this guy he's a workhorse. He's a real pitcher. And I really like Charlie Morton tonight.
Yeah, I would temper my expectations for a low owned thing though. I have him.
You think so?
Again, yeah, I think he's going to get owned.
People are sharp; they'll probably catch on to it.
Yeah, I think that he might get owned as much as Snell. Maybe not quite as much.
Whoa. Okay.
Just because of the matchup, also, you know.
I don't think so, but maybe I'm missing something, because I just think that we've been getting him all year in the 7K range and stuff. And I know he's been good lately, but this guy has literally like never been priced up really. By the way, I'll also point out, I mean, his last 2 starts against the Mets, he put up 26.3 in his other start. So he's average, last 2 starts getting a combined 64 fantasy points against this team. Definitely, I have interest in him. I'm surprised that if he does get as much ownership as you think, because the actual raw points projection aren't that high on him. But I do, I just love him tonight. And I'm sort of surprised that no one's into Atlanta tonight. Am I missing something about this?
It's so funny that you say that, because I was just about to say, why is nobody playing Atlanta? And then I looked at my numbers and it doesn't look like they rate to be good. And I can't quite imagine why that would be the case. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, is like Tom Seaver back for the Mets or something like that? I mean, like who is that? McGill Gorilla is pitching?
Yeah.
Is that what's happening?
He just pitched against this team, and he actually pitched okay, gave up 2 runs in 4 innings, gave up a home run. But a low-owned Atlanta against a guy, basically a bullpen-ish game with a very, very low-end starter to start with. Yeah, they're expensive. So maybe people will play on FanDuel. Maybe that's why. But I have Atlanta as just ahead of Cleveland. And if these ownerships stay the way they are, because it's hard to stack them. You got Albies at 5.6 and Acuna at 6.3. As I say every night, it used to be Jose Ramirez is the best play on every slate. This year, it's Acuna is the best play. And I got to give a little shout out to Acuna. Did you happen to see that the other night when he got the Molly threw him up and in, and it hit his bat on a 3-0 pitch, but it was like an up and in one. The next pitch, he hit the hardest home run that's ever been hit on since they've recorded him on Statcast at 450 feet on the field. And reminded me of the Bo Jackson, Nolan Ryan thing. Nolan Ryan throws 2 balls at his head and then he hits the ball 450 feet to center field. It was exactly like that. I just love this guy. I think if you're going to try and stack him, you can get some lower ownership. I mean, you'll have some cheaper prices on the Contreras, who by the way is a pretty good hitter. Almonte, Riley, and then you try and get Acuna and Freeman or Acuna and Albies. Swanson is sort of in the middle and will be low owned. They're all going to be low owned in my opinion. So I love the Atlanta at what I think is going to be almost 0 ownership. So I have Atlanta behind Toronto and Boston, but not by much. And I may end up switching more onto their side. I love playing the Atlanta guys because you get outs with these guys. You have Dansby Swanson who could steal you a base even if he's struggling, at the plate. Same with Albie, same with Acuna, same with Freeman. And then you've got the power of Riley and Almonte at a cheap price down there, and Contreras, who I think is an underrated catcher. So I do like the Atlanta stack quite a bit today.
Yeah. So Milwaukee, Chicago, that game was close, and so funny. Like Peralta came out with like a 3-2 lead or 4-3 lead or 4-2 lead or whatever, and then that was immediately given up. As opposed to like Bauer, who came out with like a 3-2 lead, and then the relievers, every one of them put like runners on second and third with nobody out to screw him, and they held them all off, and Bauer ended up getting the win. The thing is that this game they used I think what's his name? Somebody from Milwaukee ended up pitching, or I think some weird guy pitched or something like that. I think all kinds of, or Sogard for the Cubs ended up pitching, I think.
I didn't see that.
Sogard revenge against his old team, pitching against his old team.
There you go.
So with that said, I think Woodruff gets the leash. He projects the best. It's going to be the highest owned, and he's my favorite pitcher. That's where I'm at there. I'm not getting to Davies, not getting to the hitting. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I was really not proud. I didn't like that I called it, but I mean, I had the Davies the other night. And look, it's not only put up 22 fantasy points because he didn't strike enough of them out. That was what I said was the concern. But for some reason, completely owns that Dodger team. I can't figure it out exactly. he owns the Dodgers. We have some pretty good BVP here historically. And it all goes very much in Woodruff's favor. You've got 45 strikeouts and 120 at-bats against him. That's an incredible strikeout, incredible K rate. Also, they're hitting about 100 off of him. Very hard not to like Woodruff here. I don't think it's as much like you have to lock him in, because I think you could make an argument for Robbie Ray. You do get an extreme pitcher's umpire in Ben May as of what we have right now. And Woodruff, if you're playing a cash game, is the guy I think you start with as a pitcher, in my opinion. Certainly, I have nothing bad to say about Woodruff in this matchup. I just would say that, Robbie Ray, if he comes in at half the ownership or a third the ownership, which is definitely possible, I think that there's a, pretty much just as good of a case there for him. And you could even do something where you try and get the max points, because I there's a lot of good hitting stuff on the slate that we want to pay up for, but at the same time, we've got there's going to be a couple pitchers I think that get in the 30 range tonight. We've seen a lot of guys just getting their 20 to 25, and we're good with that lately. I think you're going to see some pitchers hit that 30 plus range tonight. You got another 8.5 K prep on Woodruff with a great pitcher's ump. So Woodruff, I have Woodruff, Snell, and Morton as my favorite pitchers that we talked about, with Robbie Ray as let's see who the umpire is as the next guy for me. So, and it is a multi-entry slate. You got the 111, so I'll be playing a number of entries in that one. I'm not going to be single entry Bobby tonight. Also, I'm back in business at home with an actual setup instead of on the road and recording from a park. But yeah, no bats for me in this one. I wouldn't mind if anybody does want to take a shot on some of these Milwaukee bats. But I just think it's the wrong slate for it, in my opinion.
So we go into the next game, and I wanted to, for those of you, I think it is important to understand this. So for those of you that tried to play these guys last night, right? You have Giolito and Maeda. There are people out there like, oh, I tried to play Giolito. He was 9,200 last night. Why is he 8,700 today? And Maeda was 7,500 last night. Why is he 7K today? It's the exact same situation. I mean, the reason why just is because, DraftKings algorithm, they take a slate view. You know what I mean? Like last night they were up against, there was very little competition. So they priced them up accordingly, and today with like a zillion pitchers you could pick from, that's why these guys are priced down. It's not like, it's not like they're locks down here at these prices. It's just, they're just better. There's more competition for that ownership. So that's why they price these guys down a little bit. With that said, I do think that Giolito still rates to be a good play at 8,700. I have him as right there, man. I mean, honestly, like right in the top 5. And Maeda, maybe the outside looking in a little bit with those other SP2s, but I don't think so. I think that could make the same case for kind of a fishy looking Maeda as I can for a fishy looking Velasquez. Snell is obviously a little more solid, but he's got kind of a tough matchup. Not that, Maeda's got it easy. But I don't think Maeda is out of play today, and I don't think that 7K makes him like that much, a lock, even though he was 7,500 yesterday. I think he's completely in play. I think he's going to get 10%. I think that's warranted. And if I were multi-entering, it's probably what I would get myself. I'm not quite getting to the hitting on either side of this, and I think both these pitchers are just kind of are in play. I think Giolito is obviously more in play. But I think that Maeda is also.
Another one I'll be interested to see where the umpire goes here, because of the thing with Maeda that worries me is that, so on a big slate like this where we have a ton of options, where we didn't have a ton of guys we could have used, it was he or Scafani in the lower end yesterday, right, were the early decisions. But I don't know that the pitch count, I don't like guys who are still coming back from an injury who they will kind of cater to a little bit, coming off of, whatever, it wasn't even that long of a break. It was really just a couple weeks, but we haven't seen him throw a ton of pitches yet. So I'm a little less interested than I was last night in Maeda, but I do have some, he's mildly interesting. I just think that I think I would probably side with Snell over him. Giolito, this is why people, Giolito and Woodruff are your cash game pitchers, in my opinion. If you're just right off the bat, if you're playing cash games, this is a ridiculous price for Giolito. The thing that's a little bit scary is you do have a Minnesota lineup that, that has some talent and all that, but I don't know, man. I am going to have a hard time not getting into Giolito here at this price. And that's pretty much it. I don't really know what else to say. He's going to be popular. I think he's an awesome play. We've mentioned other guys, other routes you can go. And this is, to me, why there's no way Charlie Morton gets like 10% ownership even. I don't think anyone is going. Maybe they will. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe it'll change because I think he should be. But I think you could play a nice little Giolito and Charlie Morton, and you're getting sort of that mid tier and enough savings to where it makes some sense. Giolito has an interesting history. He doesn't strike out as many of these Minnesota bats as he does for most teams. And you've got guys who have some terrific BVPs against him, but overall they haven't hit him much in general, outside of really just, two guys, and that's Nelson Cruz and Max Kepler, who have, 9 for 23 for Cruz with 4 home runs, 8 for 27 for Kepler with 3 home runs off of them. I personally I still love Giolito, but I think he and Morton are like they're a great tournament combination. I think people would play one of those guys, and I think it's going to be Giolito for the most part. But I really like the idea of potentially playing both those two guys together.
I'll tell you, man, you can make really good cases, obviously, for Woodruff. You can make a really good case for Ray. You can make a good case for Snell, Giolito, Morton. I think that that ownership either spreads out kind of neatly among those, or if it doesn't, you should just be pounding on whoever gets ignored. I think all those plays between Woodruff, Ray, Giolito, Snell, and Morton, I think they're all really, really good plays. And if and again, I think that if it spreads out ownership wise, then just play your favorites or whatever. But I think you shouldn't be not embarrassed. You shouldn't be afraid to just pound whoever ends up getting ignored. And if you're right, if you're going to get Morton, Giolito, as being the lesser owned combination, I'm certainly pound that.
Yeah,
I didn't even get to Bueller, by the way. Who's good too.
Yeah, we've got more. This is a big slate. There's a lot of options on this slate for sure. There's a lot of guys, and I just point out again, Giolito 7.5 K prop. K props I really do think are things I like to pay attention to. So definitely interesting there. And look, it's too early to say if you didn't like any of that, but I think in this next game, and by the way, no hitting for me. Oh, sorry, not the next game. Sorry, I jumped a game. The Baltimore Houston thing is going to be an important thing to pay attention to, who actually pitches for Baltimore. And then I thought, does it even really matter? Because Houston is another one of I think, we've talked about some good stacks, and my favorites being Toronto, Boston, and Atlanta. And that's why I guess they're not going to be owned, because there's just too many good stacks out there. But Houston against basically anybody, and then that bullpen behind them in Baltimore, it's definitely going to be time to play some of these Houston bats. The problem is on DraftKings, a lot of the bats you'd want, especially against the lefty, they're just expensive. I mean, you've got Alvarez at 6,100, and he's a lefty. You've got Altuve, who was a lefty, crushes lefties, but he's 5,900, 5,600 now for Correa, who generally has had more power against righties throughout his career. Gurriel, who has shown more power this year, but 5,300 is a lot to pay for him. I'll play Brantley all day at 4,400 in general, but I mentioned a bunch of other guys who I like better with power and speed upside, and Brantley's probably a better real life hitter than some of the other guys I mentioned, but he doesn't have that same power speed combination upside, and the same goes for Tucker. Tucker's not as good against lefties, so he won't be as popular. The stack makes more sense to me than the one-offs do in this game, and it's a little bit lower for me than some of the other stacks, but I want to see who's pitching for one thing. I don't feel confident necessarily that it's going to be Wells or how they're going to do it. I think it's going to be more of a bullpen game, but I don't know yet for sure. That's why there's no run total projected on this game yet. And I do think you're going to get Houston at low ownership after seeing them as chalk for a while. And it's just hard to afford these bats. And I have them a little bit lower than the other guys who I like better, but they're definitely on the board. A little lower than my favorite 3 so far, which are Toronto, Boston, and Atlanta.
I'm sure Houston's going to score 9 runs, but like you said, I mean, all these guys are like 5,800. It's
right.
It's kind of tough to stack a team like that. And Baltimore did they did a number on Houston in those later innings. They really got to them. I don't have any interest, believe it or not, based on everything we said, on anything in this game. No hitting, no pitching. Obviously, there's probably a one-off within here that I could probably get to, but I didn't quite. I just didn't quite. I was kind of a little stingy for the price.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be hard to do, but I mean, at the same time, zero ownership. I think. I really think this game that they get overlooked tonight. And that sounds really weird because most other slates, we'd see this situation and go, "Let's get all the Houston we can get."
Yeah, we can, which is none. I mean, like all the Houston we can get, you just can't get much.
Right. Well, I mean, if you played the maybe a Snell Giolito or something like that, or even a Snell like Maeda, which you get or Snell Velasquez. The more I get into this slate, the less I'm starting to have interest in Velasquez. I'll tell you that. Right? but at the same time, it is Miami, and it wouldn't surprise me if he goes out there. We've seen him put up big games out of nowhere. He's really just struggled enough to where I think we don't need to do that. But definitely have some interest in the Houston stack. It's just hard to find the one-offs for me for them. If there was a one-off for Baltimore that I would really look at playing, it's probably for Houston that I would look at playing is I think it would have to be Altuve. But it's again, people aren't going to play them because they are so expensive, and I understand it because there's a lot of good places to attack today.
I'll tell you what's a while. We've already done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We threw 11 games and still not done with the 8 o'clockers. I mean, like it's like everything is just early as crap.
It's a hell of a slate.
Which is fine. I'm going to dinner, so let's go. I'm going to get all those things in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't getting scratched. Baltimore. So we did Baltimore, Houston, Arizona, St. Louis. I didn't get to anything here. I have 1, 2, 3. No, I have 7 stacks on DraftKings, and neither of them are listed. St. Louis, Arizona. Didn't get to either of the pitching, and same on FanDuel. Do you like anything?
So I think if you're going to talk about a guy like Mejia, you'd be much better off playing Caleb Smith. Smith is a real pitcher with actual strikeout upside. And I think Mejia even has some talent. He's just it's very raw. And but look at him. He's gotten back to his innings back. Finally, and he pitched well against the Dodgers. Put up 20 fantasy points the other day. Pitched well against Milwaukee. Didn't show up hugely in the stat sheet because he only put up 18 fantasy points. Nothing amazing, but they don't. St. Louis this is a good lineup on paper versus lefties, but I just think it's mildly interesting. He's got a 5.5 K prop, which is reasonable for a guy at 6,600. The interesting thing to me is, like, on a smaller slate, I would be talking about trying to stack Arizona, just because. Well, it's weird with Martinez. I feel like we see the good and bad in him, but overall, just really isn't the same pitcher he used to be, and the strikeout numbers are alarmingly low. So I would want to take some shots here, but I just don't think it's the right slate to get either of these guys. And again, the St. Louis hitting it looks like, Goldschmidt is a good play. I mean, Dylan Carlson makes some sense. Tyler O'Neill, I could name a lot of Nolan Arenado. There's a lot of good plays. I just would remind everybody that Caleb Smith is actually a decent pitcher. Behind him, they have nothing. You have a huge run total, and you have an extreme pitcher's umpire in this game. So I'm not going to be stacking them. I think Goldschmidt as a one-off is the kind of first baseman I would take some shots on, but I think his ownership is going to be pretty high. And I don't know if I'm actually going to play Caleb Smith. I just think we need to mention him if we're going to talk about these cheapos, because he definitely belongs in the same category with these guys. I mean, it wasn't when he's healthy, which is really rare. He's a guy who can get into the 9K range as a pitcher sometimes, and he's 6,600 with a great pitcher's umpire against a team that has not been as good as they're supposed to be against lefties this season. That's all I got, really. It's probably a stay away game for me, but there's definitely some interest. There's a lot of interesting games today. Let's put it that way. If this was the last slate of the year and that we had showdowns for every game, I think we could have a lot of fun, but I don't think we're going to do it on this slate.
So I got to ask you, I guess I'll ask you this way as we talk about this next game. Are you going to do it?
Not today.
Okay.
Again, just the wrong slate. I'm going to take a mini victory lap on this one, because I think I've been right about Marquis pretty much every time I've said it so far this season. I've liked him, and every time he's produced. Now, if he was 5,700 again, let's go. We're in business, and I think he's okay even here. Pittsburgh can't hit, but at the same time, they don't have the strikeout guys that you really want, and I just am not getting to it. I also hate the idea. I just look at Colorado. I mean, Colorado has been shut out. I know none of them have been at Coors. I know they're a different team at Coors. I know they're too cheap. I think, Jonathan Daza, like, look, cash game, automatic, put him in. Okay. 3,100 batting second for a team with the highest run total on the slate in Coors. Yes, put him in. Okay. There's a lot of guys who make sense with just, on their, I think honestly, my McMahon is probably my favorite play here along with Story, but I think I'd rather play Tatis than Story. So it's a little weird. I probably won't stack this because I think there's so many other good stacks to stack a pretty chalky Colorado team. At least the guys who I like are going to be popular, except for McMahon. But Dom Nunez at 2.4 with a little bit of pop in his bat, even batting at the bottom of the order. Daza, it's very easy to see how you end up with some Colorado. So I'm not going to say I'm going to end up with no Colorado bats, but I'm not going to play the chalky team as my main stack on a slate where I like other teams better. I do think if I had to predict, who scores the most runs tonight, they'd probably end up somewhere in the top 4 or 5, but I don't think I need to do it at these ownerships with the other stacks that I like coming in just so much less owned. And again, it feels wrong to stack a team that's been, shut out almost 16% of the time this season. Shut out. I mean, it's hard to get shut out. You should get shut out like a few times a year in baseball, not 11 times, and we're not even at the All-Star break yet. I know, again, not in Coors, but it's not like these guys all of a sudden turn into the greatest hitters of all time. So every bat I could say is a good play, except for probably Blackman, which is really weird to say. But I just don't think I'm going to end up, I'm not prioritizing it. I think you'll see maybe a 1-off or a 2-off here and there for my lineups. And Daza makes the most sense just because he saves money and he's 3,100 batting second. You know what I mean? Like, the wrap around, like it's begging you to wrap around with Nunez, Daza, and Tapia. And I just think I'd rather do different things on my lineups. I think those guys are all going to be 20+% owned. But I probably will have like 1 or 2 of them in a decent number of my lineups tonight.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to disagree for now. I don't think people are going to play this game.
Really?
Yeah, that's just my initial take.
Okay.
I don't know why. I think that I guess it's kind of stupid, but like for example, I think Pittsburgh is really cheap. And
yeah, you're right. Oh my God, I didn't even realize it. I just looked at I was looking at the totals. I wasn't even looking at the pricing. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Sheets. They are really cheap.
I mean, Pittsburgh, at the very least, I'll play Stallings at 3,100 at catcher. You know what I mean? In a 1-off.
Yeah.
I just think that a lot of hitting environments, like San Diego is going to take like a lot of money. I think I think it's going to be spread out decent amount here. I think the Angels will probably take a little bit. Cleveland off of that thing. So I don't think it's going to stack up for the Colorado thing. And so I think that if you do like Colorado, I think you could play them. That'd be my take. I'd like Colorado a little bit. I have them with like 4th. And then on FanDuel, I have them in like the 2nd or 3rd tier or whatever. And like you said, Daza probably really popular. But I like the better hitters. I like McMahon. I like Story. Story's obviously really expensive, but if you think about it, I mean, like if I told you that you could just play the top 2 pitchers and like stack the Colorado game and have like, and do it without making any compromises for you know what I mean? Like it does, and not be like 50% owned. And look, you're giving up like 30 other teams, you know what I mean, to do this. And we already talked about a lot of good, I think, plenty of decent spots here. But I don't think that if you did want to play Colorado or Pittsburgh, you would worry about the ownership. I think you just worry about the fact that maybe they're not great plays.
Well, I think worry a little bit on the just my argument on the Colorado. If they were to be 20, if you're talking about 20+% on a slate where you've got guys who are so take Springer, who probably ends up around 10% tonight, versus Tapia, who ends up around probably in my early guess around 20-ish%, 20 maybe a little higher. I would just much rather play the much better hitter in Coors North, who also has who has power, rather than the guy who's a good real life hitter, but not a guy great for fantasy, even as he plays half of his games in Coors. But on the Pittsburgh side, I mean, Brian Reynolds at 3,700, like, let's go. I mean, that's a cash game play right there. That's ridiculous. Polanco, I have to double check the Rockies early in the season didn't have any lefties in their bullpen. I'm not sure if that's still the case or not, and I haven't checked in the last because it hasn't come up recently. But that would be if it's still the case, I would say Polanco would be a priority play at 3K. So I mean, and then you mentioned Jacob Stallings is just way too cheap at 3,100. So I like all of that. And then you got Colin Moran at 3,100. If I was going to play a cheap first baseman, I can't play Miggy.
If he plays, I think he came out of the game or something.
Who, Moran?
Yeah.
Did he get hurt or did he get pinch hit? Because that happens a lot with him.
Let's see. He was removed.
Oh, he might have been hit by a pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it must have been, because he's 0 for 0 with 2 fantasy points, which sounds like an HBP, and no walks. So that definitely was an HBP, unless somehow he was pinch running, which I really doubt. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to stack against Marquee on this full slate, but at the same time, these I just named 4 guys who cost you absolutely nothing. So you could pitch the top two price pitchers if you wanted to tonight and easily play Colorado. I'm sorry, easily play Pittsburgh. So
pause this for just a second for me.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so just wrapping up, I do think that there are some arguments. I think that this is one of those spots where you take a couple bats in this game, in the Pittsburgh Colorado game, if you really think that they are going to be low owned. Because I mean, I think that the Pittsburgh guys I mentioned are going to be pretty high owned with Reynolds and Polanco. And I like Marquee in general. I always say that I still believe in his talent, but he does pitch in Coors Field, and he's also really good in Coors Field. Oddly enough, much worse on the road. But Reynolds at 3,700. What's great about Reynolds too, he's the real deal, by the way. I don't want to victory lap myself to death because I've been struggling. I've been getting crushed the last couple of weeks in baseball. But Brian Reynolds is a guy who early in his career I really believed in, and he's the one bat in his Pittsburgh offense that has consistently been there. And he also offers you the stolen base upside. So I really like he and Polanco the best, with Moran and Stallings being the next two, if Moran plays.
It's probably going to be an MME slate.
Like 2 slates, because this is ridiculous how many stacks there are tonight.
This is going to be an MME slate, man. I'm going to play some lineups, and you know what? I kind of got sucked in, so I'm not going to be able to do it. I just don't play high enough. But DK wanted they're offering me something if I played like 10,000 worth of buy-ins over the next week in baseball. I'm just not quite going to make it. I played like 1,013 yesterday. I'm like, that's not even close. You got to play 1,500 a day. I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm going to be able to get there. And then just in the name of getting the ticket, maybe I will. They're getting me like an 888 ticket if I play 10,000 buy-ins. I guess it's not bad. If I was going to do it anyway, right? If I was going to be close, but I'm not quite playing that big. But like tonight, like I'm MMEing or whatever, dude, I'm totally going to have the 1% owned Capricalian or whatever as another guy in there. I mean, why not? I mean, they're playing. It's like the 47th game on the slate. No one's gonna have any energy left to go look at this game. I think, like by the time it gets there in their process, and I got no problem with him. It's just right alongside of all this other crap, like between Velasquez, Morton, all this stuff. I was calling crap. I mean, but I think he's got a really, really good matchup. He's at home. He's got win equity. He's, who's going to play him over Snell? Probably nobody.
Right.
And why not? I'll take a shot. I didn't get to quite any of the hitting, and I didn't get to Fulte, and that'll be my contribution to this game.
Yeah, I think that it's hard. It's stupid to say what I was about to say, which is that, look, if you're playing lineups these days, a lot of lineups, you have to stack against Fulte every game, especially with a high strikeout team, where that's really their only problem. Like you look at guys who strike out 25-30% of the time, and then you get a guy who can't strike anybody out. It looks like it screams just of he's going to get rocked by these guys. It's we have all this great hitting weather on the slate. I mean, if this game was being played in Boston for some reason, or any of these other parks that we were talking about, I think Oakland's run projection would be near 7. I really do. Texas has a garbage bullpen. Fulte can't strike anybody out. Look, he's been around the block. He knows he can't. So we could say he has tricks or whatever like that. Maybe we can argue that. A 0% Oakland stack is certainly, I mean, I would put Oakland right there. I would have more interest in Oakland than Colorado. I'd have more interest in Oakland than Pittsburgh. I probably have more interest in Oakland, probably right there with Atlanta for me, maybe a little bit ahead of Atlanta. I just don't like that it's 68 degrees. That's really it. I mean, I have no other argument for why I wouldn't play Oakland here, except for that there's a million other great stacks, and they're expensive. I love Olsen, though, here. I love Laureano here. Chapman's price is a little nuts. You don't need to get that. I don't know if I want to do that. And no, you don't really want to play the Sky Bolts, Andrus, and Kemp in general. You can fit them into stacks. And then you've got Moreland, you could combo it. The problem is Morton, because he bats near. So I always make this point, and it's just a general point for DFS you guys want to pay attention to. And that's what we're using these shows for. It's not just to go through the slate, but like you want to figure this stuff out. The problem with playing Moreland, it's not the reason why he's such a huge pinch hit risk is because he bats near Olsen in the lineup.
That's interesting.
Because that when they go to the bullpen, they end up bringing in a lefty for that spot because even the traditional lefty crushers, well, especially when Laureano was out, it was made even more sense. But Canna's out right now, so you've got them batting near each other in the lineup. So they'll often bring in a lefty to pitch the Olsen, the inning that Olsen comes in. That's usually the second round, and I don't think Fulte lasts too long in this game. So that means that it's likely Moreland gets pinch hit for. I still think that there's an excellent chance there's a couple home runs off of Fulte. I would be surprised if Oakland doesn't hit a few home runs tonight in general. It just feels weird to play a team in that park on this slate with this many great stacks. But I think Matt Olson is like, if you're asking for a first baseman, if there was a guy who made me, hey, you have to pick a home run at bat for tonight, I would say Matt Olson is the easiest pick of all.
So last game on the slate, San Francisco, LA. The issue I have with Buehler is this. So I rate him top 5 play, which is good. But I feel as though that if you're going to play a 10K guy tonight, like Woodruff or Ray, that you're really going to need a ceiling. You're really going to need 30 out of them to make it work at least. I mean, because you have Giolito just waiting to pop at 8,700.
Or Snell, yeah.
You have Snell waiting to pop at 7,600. You know, God knows what Morton can put up, whatever it is. And I just don't know about, I think Buehler is like super. I think he's safe enough. You know what I mean? For like 2025. But I think against San Francisco, I think that's a tough ask for someone to put up a ceiling against him. Just like it was a tough ask for what's his name yesterday, for Bauer. And San Francisco was very pesky against him. And one guy from San Francisco must have hit the ball a freaking 1,000 miles off of him. Who was it? Crawford, I think. Yeah. Crawford just buried one. Oh my God. San Francisco's good, man. So it's a tough ask for me to like rely on Buehler to carry my lineup today. That's my only issue with that. Now, with that said, I think it's going to come. I was about to say it's going to come with low ownership, but I'm still getting him owned too. So I don't think that he's going to be someone I use just for all those reasons. Gausman, too expensive against that lineup, and I didn't get to any of the hitting.
Yeah, it's just Gausman is just strictly against the Dodgers that I would absolutely be loading up on him against most teams today. I mean, he's awesome too. Like he's turned into the pitcher that we always thought he could be. And I feel not proud of that, but I feel very like that we were on that one from a while ago. Yeah. I don't know. Look, the truth is Cody Bellinger is always going to pique my interest as long as he's below 5K, much less 4.1. But we've talked about a lot of other good guys today, and we don't need to try and go out of our way to pick on Gausman. Would it surprise me if the Dodgers scored 10 runs tonight? Not even a little bit, like not even slightly. If Gausman doesn't last 2 innings, it wouldn't surprise me. But if he goes 6 innings and gives up 3 runs, which I think is more likely range of outcomes, that's probably where I'm at. I'm struggling. I'm surprised that people are as interested in Buehler as they are, to be honest with you today. I love him. I think he's a terrific, as good a real life pitcher. He's as sure of a thing as there is in baseball. I mean, can you find a game he's pitched? No, you can't. He hasn't pitched a game this year where he hasn't gone 6 innings. That's incredible. I don't know if there's hardly anybody in baseball that can say that. And he's only given up more than 3 runs in 2 games of those. So he's all quality starts, but 2 games. Probably interestingly, maybe a better play on FanDuel because you feel basically like you almost have a lock for that quality start and likely the win because it's the Dodgers. But I don't think that I'm going to need to prioritize him. I agreed with, look, you have Ray with an 8.5K prop and you have an 8.5K prop on Woodruff and Ray's 200 more and Woodruff 700 more and Buehler's got a 6.5K prop. And I think that's accurate. I think that's, Buehler, I don't expect him to go crazy here. Now, can he go out there and strike out 11 and 7 innings and give up nothing? Absolutely. But I don't think that we need to count on that as being the most likely range of outcomes. He is one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's a much better pitcher than Robbie Ray is, and he gets to pitch against a National League team in Dodger Stadium rather than in Toronto. But when you play those guys on the high end tonight, Robbie Ray could give up 2 runs in the first inning, still strike out 15 guys and pitch 7 innings. You know what I mean? So I'm totally with you on your assessment of that. We can do a quick recap because this is a really this is one of those slates where I wish this could be 3 different slates, and I think you could get different. Maybe we just don't worry about ownership hardly at all. And really just play the best plays. But the problem is the best plays in terms of hitting are all over the place. So Do you want to start off your top? Well, I can start off, I guess, with my guys.
It's interesting. My son is already in college now. My daughter's already graduated. Back when these kids were looking at college, if those of you who have kids looking at college, there was always this issue when you would think of sending your kid to a really big school, like either Wisconsin or Michigan or something like that, the school being so big. And when you would go on these interviews and all these tours, they would say, at these big schools, you have to try to make the big school small somehow, by getting into clubs, by doing whatever. It's the way I feel about some of these slates, man. You got to find a way to make these, the one that you try to make these big slates small, try to just make peace with a couple of stands somewhere along the way. Because if you try to fight like how big the slate is by just playing a zillion lineups, I don't know, man. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think you almost BobbyFi it up and if there's 1,000 different choices, just pick freaking one and just win 100,000 or something like that. Mm-hmm. But just try make a stand. Say, okay, you know what? I'll take. I'm not playing Velasquez, or I'm not playing, Snell, or I'm not playing whatever it is. And because again, you dean it up or whatever, you play like a zillion freaking plays. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think you have to make make the school feel small, so to speak, make the slate feel small, and just kind of just make peace with that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that's.
So with that said, my top pitchers for now are Woodruff and Ray, and then just a whole mess of second choices. Actually, it's Woodruff with a whole mess of second choices, which I still have to kind of work out. I'll just kind of leave it at that. With respect to stacks, and this is on DraftKings, I like San Diego, KC, and Pittsburgh. KC and Pittsburgh, obviously more on the value train. And then also Colorado, Angels, a little Miami, a little Detroit. I'll do FanDuel too. FanDuel, I like Woodruff. Then San Diego, Yankees, Tampa's top stacks. I'll mention KC, Miami again. And then I threw in Boston, Colorado, Toronto, and Cleveland.
Yeah, it's a million stacks that make a lot of sense today. So I mean, maybe the guy playing the individual best bat 8 different times is the way to go. But I actually think there's going to be enough teams that score 10 runs or approach the 10-run mark tonight. So I still love Toronto. I'm just going to keep playing that. It's been one thing that actually has worked for me this year. Is playing that Toronto at lower ownership in what I consider to be what we call it Coors North. Again, a little bit of weather concerns. If there's any weather concerns, I'll just be happy to jump off of a game. Toronto, Boston, Atlanta all stand out to me. I love the mini stacks from Pittsburgh and Colorado. The mini stacks of Pittsburgh and then Colorado, a couple, maybe a bat or two for some value actually, which is weird because you can get the best value is in that game. That's the weirdest part. And then you get the Oakland against Fulte, which is just the perfect matchup to tee off on that guy. I just don't love the hitting park, and I'll have to come off of some of my Detroit takes because it's just too big a slate, and my Seattle mini stack that's probably saved for a different slate. Houston is completely viable, and Cleveland is completely viable, but I still am leaning the Toronto, Boston, Atlanta route, and I think there's enough value in those other spots where you can play any of these stacks low owned, like Atlanta, Boston, and Toronto are expensive, but we can use the cheap guys in the 3K Polanco, the 3,100 Daza, the 3,700 Reynolds. But what it mostly makes me want to do when this slate, and I just think this is a really important thing to look at, is try to stack a team that stacks well on the infield, which again takes me back to Toronto a little bit. Not as great as it was when we had McGuire at 2K or whatever, but you're going to have there's the outfield options are out of this world good tonight. And they're you can get the high price, you can get the low price, you can do it any which way, but you can get great value with huge even projections at guys between 3K and 4,200. So if you can find a team that you can like to stack on the infield, that's what I would be looking to try and do. And that sort of takes me a little bit more away from Atlanta, a little bit more away from Boston. So Toronto, Cleveland is a team that you could stack on the infield. Oakland is a team that you could stack on the infield. Maybe that's the way that we should be approaching this slate. In addition to obviously trying to focus in on just, one or two stacks, maybe that's the way you could look at it. And that's the way I'm at least going to approach it. And then from a pitching standpoint, I think we talked about a lot of pitchers. Yeah, maybe Velasquez and Maeda make some of my lineups. But I think it's going to be Giolito, Snell, Woodruff, Morton, and Ray. I would consider Ray the GPP play of all those guys, because I think that things could turn south on him. But I think he's also got the highest upside on the slate along with Woodruff. So any of these make a lot of sense, but Giolito and Morton feels like a nice steady. If I was playing one lineup, that's probably how I would go, or Snell and Giolito, or Snell and Morton. Something in that range is probably what I would do today if I was playing one lineup. But with a bunch of lineups, I think we want to mix in some of. But really, I'm only really using those 5 pitchers, and then like I said, I might squeeze in a Maeda or a Velasquez or a Caleb Smith, but I doubt it, because these other 5 guys, I expect at least 2 of them to put up really, really, really big games. And with that said, I think we're ready to move on, right?
Yes. Well, we're ready. Well, we'll see you. I'll see you later.
See what that means. Yeah, this is a wild one. So yeah, guys, good luck to everybody out there. Let's see the top of leaderboards, and we're going to be launching a bunch of new stuff on the site over the next few days. I did just get back in the middle of the night, so give me a few days, but we've got some new tools that we're going to have for free before we end up charging for them by the end of the week, or at the very worst early next week after the 4th of July.
You guys are really lucky that Bobby was away, because we would have been charging by now.
Yeah, it's true, but this is good. I mean, get in while you can. You know, TrueDFS.com. We've got. I mean, Sheets' tools, as I keep saying, are the best out there. So, guys, good luck to you, and we'll see you at the top of leaderboards.